Serious women of Reddit, what's the most ridiculous thing you've had to do to get a guy to leave you alone? Story 1. The guy always followed and attempted to me whenever I tried to go on a simple walk, and even showed up at my doorstep persistently. There was a time when I was actually scared to leave my own house. The idea that I should feel so restricted by just one guy filled me with determination to do something so horrible that he would have no choice but to leave me alone. I shat in a cup and threw it at him. It got all over his shirt and dripped down his front, setting him into a panic. Thankfully, I never saw him again. Story 2. Called his grandmother. The story was working at a diner in college after moving back to my hometown. I reconnect with a childhood friend, have some polite conversation but maintain strict boundaries. Then he started showing up at my workplace, every single day, and hit on me relentlessly. It got to the point where he would come in, buy a coffee or a soda, and then hang out for hours until my shift was over so he could follow me to my car. I wasn't allowed to kick him out of the diner because hey, he's a paying customer, and I didn't think I could call the cops. I told him over and over and over again to leave me alone, but of course nothing. At one point he went into the diner while I was in class because of course he had memorized my schedule like a creepy little worm and convinced my boss that he was my cousin and he had to get my phone number from her because our grandmother had had an accident. That was the final straw. I went home, called my great-grandma and got her to pull his grandmother's phone number out of her address book. We had a great talk and she put the beat down on him, I guess, because I never saw him again after that. Story 3. Okay, this is heavy and I've never told anyone because it makes me feel ridiculous. Anyway, I was at a party in college, out at this girl's house in the middle of nowhere and everyone was drinking. I had too much and needed fresh air and to grab my purse so I went out and sat behind my car. This guy came out and sat next to me. He was in my English class so I knew him but we never really talked. Long story short, he hit on me, I rejected him, and he flipped and forced me into my back seat to try to rape me. I was parked far enough away and in the dark so no one saw and he had my mouth covered and all my drunk brain could think was that awful advice of pee yourself and your attacker will be grossed out and leave. So I did, and he had his hand forced down my pants so it got all over his hand. He was pretty grossed out. Slapped me with the pee hand, called me a sick b to ch and left. I was too embarrassed to go back and covered in so I just left. I drove home drunk and ashamed and crying. Luckily I made it there safe. I took a shower and laughed at myself and cried. So yeah, probably the farthest I've gone to get rid of a guy. Edit. Wow, Reddit gold. That's freaking awesome guys, thanks. Stay safe out there. Story 4. After me and my ex broke up he stalked me for 2 years. He would text me every so often and I would be polite and ask him how he was. Then he would start to insult me when I didn't want to hang out with him. He cheated on me with another girl. After getting sick of his random text messages I pretended that it wasn't my number. When he messaged me I said, "Who is this?" He was like, "You know who it is." I replied with, "I just got this number and guys are constantly texting it for this chick named." My ex apologized and I never heard from him again. Edit. I did not realize this was such a popular way to get rid of an ex. To clarify, I did not have voicemail activated at the time so he couldn't call to find out if it was still my number through that way. I used to block his number but he would just block his number then call. I came up with this idea when I started dating my current boyfriend. When my ex started the texting my current boyfriend was right there so if he had to he would have answered the phone and told my ex that this is his number now. Luckily it didn't go that far. Story 5. I went on a date to the beach with this guy and he invited me to his house. We ate some food and afterwards he kissed me. It made me a little uncomfortable so I told him I had to go, and that I had plans. He tried to convince me to stay, and then said that I couldn't leave until I said I would be his girlfriend. Red flags are going off and so I tried to keep the mood very light, and started to gather my things while saying things like, "Oh, you really like me, hey, that's sweet." I went to leave and suddenly he's in front of me, grabbing my wrists and asking me to be his girlfriend. "Yeah, okay bud, whatever you say, I'm your girlfriend now." Unfortunately he drove so I told him my parents lived nearby. Not true, and I would just walk there. I really didn't want him to know where I lived at this point. He follows me out into the street, offering me a ride, trying to hold my hand and walk me home. So I just bolt. I broke a flip-flop that day. I think he followed me for a while but I got far enough ahead of him. It was about 2-hour walk home so I think eventually he just gave up. It started raining on the way. I remember being in my bathing suit and a dress, holding my shoes, running in the rain and laughing about how much I'd rather be there on the side of the road than in that guy's house for one more minute. We've been dating ever since, JK. I broke up with him over text message when I got home. Apparently, it's not so easy to force someone to be your girlfriend. Story 6. He kept writing me texts saying like, "Baby, we were meant to be together. If you give me a chance, please baby," which is code for "I want to you, why won't you let me?" So I acted like a crazy person and sent him the lyrics to Bob Dylan's Changing of the Guards and gave him an in-depth analysis on how these lyrics were a sign from some great cosmic being and made up bullshit about how I found connections in the lyrics to our new relationship. He totally off after that and never sent me another message. It was fun though. I totally recommend everyone act crazy when dealing with crazy. Story 7. I finally had to sick my dad on someone. Ordinarily I never would because the man has multiple black belts in martial arts, competitively did martial arts and was crazy. I'd much rather go to the police than dad but it didn't work. Started out as a friend of my boyfriend being introduced to me. He wasn't really my friend but was always around. He was never anything but polite but would constantly reference how lucky my boyfriend was. Fast forward to our breakup. Suddenly this guy was everywhere I went. Due to the breakup we weren't even in the same circle, the grocery store, the park, everywhere. Small town, so I didn't really consider him stalkerish, especially as he was always so polite. He asked me out once, I said no and he remained polite, continued to follow me around, made friends with all my friends, showed up anywhere he heard IDB. He was older, I was 18, he was 24, so everyone always had him by alcohol. No one complained about him, he was polite, really only spoke to me. It started to make me uncomfortable, but I didn't feel afraid. I was pretty sure I could kick his if it ever came to it in my father's daughter. So, one night my two friends were complaining they'd bought 4 tickets to a concert and the other couple backed out. I said ID go and my stalker said head go. Oops, oh well, I didn't want to be rude. Night of the concert he never showed. It was a relief, honestly. We had fun and I didn't really think about it much. A couple days later I get a collect call from my county jail. It was this guy apologizing over and over for standing me up for our first date. He got arrested for possession. I assured him I wasn't upset and that it wasn't a date anyway. I got a couple more collect calls but I just declined them. That's when the letters started, 2 or 3 a day. Some were begging forgiveness, some were explicit fantasies, some were him writing like we were a couple, talking about our future kids and stuff. I took one more call to tell him to stop. They kept coming. In his head I was mad about him being in jail keeping us apart. That's why I didn't write back or take his calls. He wrote to all my friends telling them we were in love and asking them to get me to talk to him. When they told him to stop, he decided they were against him and trying to keep us apart. They were lying about him and confusing me. I called the jail and told them, so they restricted my number and didn't post letters to me from him. It was quiet for about a week. Then letters in his handwriting started to appear in my car and mailbox but not posted. The letters were telling me he got locked up in psych for trying to kill himself and how I was an evil for doing this to him. Then the next would be begging forgiveness, then more fantasy stuff, but now it all featured him punishing me and teaching me how to be a good girl. I called the police. They caught someone putting the letters in my car, had hired some ex-con to deliver them, had mailed to him and that guy would deliver them. The guy had photos of me he was mailing back to my stalker. That guy didn't get charged but they revoked his parole or something. It was quiet for another week. Then it all started again. Finally I called my dad and told him the whole story and showed him a few of the letters. He turned a shade of purple and drove straight to the jail. I have no idea what he said or did, but I only got one more letter. It was a terrified apology begging me not to have him killed and had never contact me again. He never did. He never contacted any of my friends. Edit spelling of a word. Story 8. I once told a guy at a party that his personality was so disgusting it made me want to vomit. He didn't believe me, and continued to hit on me, so I voluntarily vomited on him just to get my point across. Story 9. I told a creeper I wasn't underage, I was in college, looked like a high schooler, was 21 and a senior in college, out at a bar restaurant with some friends who were also college students, but not all 21 and able to drink legally, so we were there before the 8 p.m. 21 only cutoff. I was well known as a creeper magnet. You could drop me in a room with 100 guys, 99 perfectly reasonable human beings and one creeper, and the creeper and no one else would instantly make a beeline for me. Creeper comes up, all he beba, and there I am, drinking my Coke like please go away now. He sits down, makes himself comfortable, starts grilling me about what classes I like, what my plans are after graduation, the like. I'm giving one-word answers, looking for my friends to come rescue me from Creeper. Creeper asks if I know where I want to go to college. It occurs to me that he thinks I'm a high school student. Bonus Creeper points, the guy's in his 30s, he very slyly offers to buy me a drink, nudge nudge the special kind. I tell him, if I want to drink ill by my own, since I'm a senior in college. Little sonic boom as he vacated the stool. Yeah, I had a 30-something guy quit hitting on me because I wasn't 17. Story 10. This guy wouldn't stop texting me after a horrible date. So I sent him a long text about how I couldn't wait to get married because then I could just have a bunch of babies and not have to get a job, and how my only goal in life was to live off my husband's money. He was obsessed with the idea that women only date men for their money, despite the fact that he was broke and lived with his mom. He stopped texting me immediately. Story 11. Semi-recently, I was at a 24-hour restaurant by myself around 9 or 10 p.m. It was the kind of place that had counters with bar stools and free Wi-Fi, with a mix of locals and travelers. At one point I felt watched, and I looked up to see a man staring and smiling at me. I thought maybe I had met him somewhere, so I gave a quick polite smile and resubmerged myself in Reddit and my cheap meal. An hour and a half later, my phone battery died and I paid up and left. Well, he was there in the parking lot, waiting for me, smiling and waving from his truck and motioning for me to come over. I was shocked and froze mid-step for a couple seconds, but then nervously shook my head no and turned away to unlock my car door. I heard the truck engine start, saw the bright beams of headlights flash on behind me as I quickly hopped in my car, no fiddling with music playlists or air conditioning, and sped out of there. I thought ID made it clear I wasn't interested, but when I saw a truck speeding along just behind me, I switched lanes just in case, even then thinking I must be paranoid. There were plenty of truckers on the road that night. It probably wasn't him. The truck also switched lanes, all the while getting closer. I frantically swerved back to the other lane. So did the truck. By this time he was right behind me, flashing his brights. After that only caused me to speed up. He swerved up next to my car and drove level with me while grinning and jovially waving for me to pull over. He chased me all over the road through town until I turned at full speed without signaling or braking and skidded sideways down a side road, darted into a random driveway, turned off the car and hid crying and shaking for half an hour until I was sure he was gone. edit for clarity. Story 12. Sometimes I wear a fake wedding ring. I stared because several men have grabbed my hand looking for a ring, and felt the absence of one meant I should definitely them. Sadly, it's easier to pretend I belong to someone else than it is to get some people to understand that I just don't want to talk to them, let alone them. Story 13. I got my boss to shout at him. I worked in a Chinese shop just after I left school, and this guy showed up every day for weeks begging me to go out with him, telling me how pretty I am, etc. It got to the point where I was afraid to go to work because head started to hint that bad things could happen to girls who aren't nice. So I told my boss using my 2 words of Chinese and a lot of sign language because Wang spoke zero English, and when he came in she started shouting at him in Chinese. I want you to picture the scene. 6-foot black man with muscles on his muscles being chased out of a tiny Chinese shop by an even tinier Chinese lady with a broom who is yelling at the top of her lungs. I'm pretty sure that the sea couldn't have washed him clean of what she said to him. It's a treasured memory to this day. Story 14. There was a guy in one of my freshman classes who would stare at me all during class. The desks were arranged in such a way that half were facing the front of the room, and the other half were facing the opposite wall. This gave us a very clear view of one another. I had a gravity storm while I was walking down the stairs one day and somehow ended up with an impressive gash in the side of my leg. The guy saw the wound the next day and asked me what happened, and the day after that, he came up to my desk and said he had something to show me. He pulled up his pant leg to reveal a cut that was in the exact same spot as mine, as well as of a similar length. He told me he had done it for me. This was at the very beginning of the semester, and for the rest of the year I was extremely vigilant about only looking straight ahead in that class so as not to make eye contact with him. I pretty much never saw the left side of my world events classroom. Edit. I just looked him up online. His Facebook profile picture is the default icon, and he has 9 friends. He's also on some chat website, and his description is named Depressed 19, looks like his father is in jail. Story 15. Late to this thread. When I was a junior in high school, a friend of mine introduced me to one of his friends. I talked to him every now and then. He said he was interested in me. I politely let him know I didn't reciprocate his feelings. Then the text started. For a few weeks he would text me very explicit things constantly. This was before blocking was a thing. One night my dad saw I was upset and asked me what was wrong. I told him my dad is a psychiatrist. He can stay alarmingly calm in almost any situation and he's used to dealing with crazy people. So my dad ended up calling this guy and calmly explained to him that he needed to tell his parents about harassing me because the police were going to be showing up at his house soon. The guy started crying and I never heard from him again. Story 16. Block him on eBay. ID already blocked him everywhere else, but he frigging bid on my auction just so he could declare his love, insist I be his mistress, and promise that his Korean fiancé baby mama really wouldn't mind. That's normal in her culture. Oh, and also accused me of ripping him off while he was at it, as he didn't actually read the auction text and didn't know the computer I was selling was broken and was missing some parts. Story 17. I faithfully prescribed to the completely insane method to get guys to leave me alone. Cackling maniacally, mumbling about severing arteries and hiding bodies, humming erratically, and staring with the most disturbed look I can muster are good deterrents. I've also got a guy to stop hitting on me at a party by always redirecting any conversation head start up to the subject of shitting myself. I find it absolutely hilarious that there is a guy, somewhere in the world, who knows me as the girl who wouldn't stop talking about shitting herself. Story 18. We lived a town away from each other in a very rural area, so if I heard he was coming into my town from friends, I would call my friend who was old enough to drive and have her pick me up. Driving country roads was the only way he wouldn't bump into me. He would also stop by house, and when my parents told him that I wasn't there, he would camp out in his car waiting for me to come home. I learned quickly that it usually took a couple of hours before he would give up and leave town. This happened a few times a week for a couple of months. Story 19. This was about 8 years ago. I was 17 and volunteered at a nursing home as a part of a high school course. I started talking to one of the older guys that worked there, and pretty quickly had a change of heart. He became obsessive and called non-stop and would leave me upwards of 50 texts in a few hours. So I downloaded this recording that would play as my answering message. It had a trio ascending tones play and the familiar message that went something like, "We're sorry, the number you are trying to reach has been disconnected," etc. I just turned my phone off for a night so that he would hear this message and no ringing. It worked, to my surprise, and I never heard from him again after that. Story 20. I had a guy who wouldn't leave me alone at a San Diego trolley station. It was late at night and I was 17 and alone. I walked up to the biggest, scariest looking guy there and pretended like he was my friend. I even gave him a huge hug. Luckily, he immediately understood what was happening and played along with it. After about 2 minutes of me talking to the big dude, the creepy stalker guy left. I thanked the big dude profusely and he was super cool about it. He said I wasn't the first girl he's had to play along with in order to scare off a creeper. Story 21. I've never had a situation where a firm "please leave me alone or I'll take this to the police" didn't work. However, the number of times it's come to that is upsetting. When I was an 18-year-old lifeguard at a family pool, there was this 30-year-old dude who'd come try to talk to me and a few other girls who worked there. He asked me how old I was, and when I said 18 he said, "Ooh, that's a fantastic age." He also then splashed me and said he'd only stop if I gave him my number. He stopped when I got my managers to kick him out. Story 22. Change my license plates. Met a guy who told me his friend follows around my car because a cute blonde drives it. Word of advice: never get personalized license plates. Story 23. I literally ran away from him, just took to my heels and dashed as fast as I could. He caught up, giggling, "Man, you run fast." He thought it was hilarious and cute. Meanwhile, I was terrified. Edit: take to one's heels as a figure of speech. Guys, I wasn't wearing heels, nor could I have attacked him with my shoes as a few of you recommended. I wasn't looking for a fight anyway. I was scared and just trying to get away safely. Story 24. Changed my number. Doesn't seem that bad, but I had to pay to change my number because some wouldn't stop texting me several times a day, all day, and calling all the time. Story 25. My mom's Toronto roommate would walk home at night in the late 70s and just recite the entire screenplay of Star Wars: A New Hope out loud. All the character voices, lightsaber battles, the whole nine, no one ever with her. Story 26. I had to stop using the front door of my house. I had to start exclusively using my back alleyway, taking it 2 blocks down to the next major road. Story 27. I don't know if this fits, but when I was about 16 I was walking home with a male friend. About halfway up a hill we noticed this strange car illegally parked. Honestly, just looked at each other and didn't give it a second thought. We had to part ways about 2 miles from my house. I lived in town so that walk wasn't scary or uncomfortable. Plus I really enjoyed it. Not even a minute after my friend leaves, that car came around the corner super quickly, and proceeded to follow me for about a half a mile. At this point I'm hyperventilating and have 911 dialed but not called yet. The sun's going down and he's getting closer, his hand on the door and on something else I couldn't see. I just made a split decision then. I bolted into a bunch of backyards. I don't even know how many fences I jumped. I basically hid in the bushes for almost an hour until it was dark. At this point I was still afraid to go home or call my mom in case he was still there. I didn't want him to see what our car and home looked like. I basically maneuvered my way through yards and small alleys. These are nice ones with shops in them. Not something you'd see in NCs. I got home, called my friend to make sure he was okay, then blabbed to my mom. She then convinced me to place a police report. Haven't heard anything back and it's been 3 years. TLDR: thought I was safe in suburban college area. Continued to be followed by massive creep. Seriously thought I was gonna die, so I hot fuzzed my way back home like Nick. Not Danny. Edit: okay, a little like Danny. Story 28. I'm a big fan of saying how would your mother feel if she heard you talking acting like that. It usually shuts them up because they realize their mother wouldn't be proud. Story 29. I live in the edge of a bad neighborhood, and one night as I was walking my dogs I see this guy start to walk up on me. Fast. At first I thought maybe he was a jogger, but he was in regular clothes. So as he gets up right behind me I turn to confront him and start barking and snarling like a mad dog at him until he was scared enough to cross to the other side of the street. My theory out crazy the crazies. Works every time. Story 30. I moved halfway across the country to get away from an abusive, stalking ex. He still relentlessly stalks me online many years later. I have no social media accounts with photos, no Facebook, and frequently change UIDs on sites I post to. Also, to help out a female friend who couldn't get a guy to leave her alone at a concert, I pretended to be her psycho butch lesbian girlfriend. She's tiny and femme, and am 58 and athletic, mostly worked, though did ask to see us make out. I told him to off, that was actually kind of fun, and we laugh about it now. Story 31. Introduced him to my girlfriend. He buggered off. That in itself wasn't super ridiculous, but he kept trying to hit on me at the laundromat, which was, you don't get to pull that unless you're Neil Patrick Harris, and it didn't even work out for him. Story 32. I've had to make hand signals for male coworkers so that when customers are being too aggressive I can flash it at my coworkers and they'll know to come and save me. I've also had to have my girlfriend pretend to be my girlfriend while out dancing one night so a guy would leave me alone. Story 33. When I was in 5th grade, this kid tormented me, kissing me when I wasn't paying attention, chasing me, stealing my jackets and wearing them. I told parents, teachers, friends, everyone thought it was funny. I had a teacher make us sit next to each other to work it out, I guess. When she left the room for a minute with the whole class watching, he did the old yawn and put his arm around me. Right when he lifted his arm up, I punched him so hard and he fell out of his chair and cried. Never touched me again, had to quit my job. He was my boss and kinda threatened me. I also had to pretend to be in a relationship on FB with a girl to make a couple of guys go away. Story 34. To be honest, dudes like this are kind of afraid of me. I don't act nice at all. If a guy does anything, anything creepy towards me, I just flip out. I threw a rock at a dude's car who catcalled me once, and sprinted towards a kid who grabbed mine in high school, ready to deck him in the face. And they always, like clockwork, get scared. High school kid ran off, and the dude in the car just kind of whined and then drove off. Men like this aren't expecting you to fight back, just to politely nod and put up with it. So when you go all axe crazy it scares the out of them. Story 35. Every time I have to get another man involved to help me. That doesn't seem that ridiculous. But it is. It should not take more than me saying no. A guy in line at a concert grabbed my crotch and when I said don't touch me he blew up, threatening to get me kicked out of line. How he was just having a good time until I was and didn't stop until his own friend said, dude, leave her alone. A couple weeks ago I was at a bar and a man I had not interacted with at all came up behind me and pulled my ponytail so hard my head cranked back. When I said don't touch me he tried to hit me. 3 other men had to drag him out of the bar. A couple weeks before that I found a man none of us knew trying to get my incredibly blacked out, we believe her drink was drugged friend into his car, and actually argued with me that he knew her and would give her a ride until a male friend shoved him away. I have more stories than anyone should have. Story 36. I hope I didn't get here too late. So this is a pretty long story, so hold on to your britches, okay? So we met in this camp before school started, and we liked the same thing, so we got together pretty well. At the end of the 2-week program he asked me out, and I said yes because why not. Later, we hung out more and I realized he was A and got mad that I danced with other guys even though we hadn't gone out at all yet. So I told him I didn't want to go out anymore, which I get is pretty lame, but he was being in. So he spent 2 hours talking about how he didn't even want to go out with me, I was just there, and how I wasn't even pretty or anything. He also called me best friend and my future friend sluts. But I, being a pushover, still pretended like I was okay being friends with him, and he got a little stranger. He would call me at 1 a.m. and talk about all his life problems and his theory on life, and he said some pretty awful dark stuff. His problems were caused by his beliefs mostly that women were trophies for men to win, and people were only friends with each other to use each other ECT, and I got pretty down talking to him. So finally I cut him off being like, I can't help you dude, let's part ways. And I thought that was that. Fast forward to the end of the school year, what's that, like 8 months later, and I get a text message from him. I don't know if you guys have ever received a text this long. But in iPhones, when a text is so long that it can't handle it, it turns into an iBook. He literally sent me an iBook saying how I was the love of his life and how he can't get over me and how we were meant to be. He then talks about how he had been watching me and told me specific things I had done that I didn't even know he was there to see, like what I was wearing on a certain day or how I would ask a question in a certain class he wasn't in. He then went on to say that he wanted to marry me and he would wait however long it took for me, but he knew I would come around and realize how we were soulmates. He then wanted me to meet up with him and meet his parents and said that if I didn't he wouldn't know what he would do. I knew he was messed up from the phone calls, but then his brother texts me saying that I need to talk to him or else he might hurt other people or himself, which put me in an awkward position to say the least. I didn't want to see him at all, but I didn't want him to hurt people. And I didn't want him to freak out in public, but I also didn't want to be alone with him, so I ended up meeting in a friend's dorm with my friend, and we spoke for about 4 hours straight. It was basically him begging me to go out with him and how cute and special I was, and every time I would say no he wouldn't give up. He said that he would never be able to move on from me unless I gave him a chance and he could never stop thinking about me and regretting it. I ended up pushing him out the door saying I will never go out with you and I don't want you to think about me anymore, not to talk to me, and if he saw me avoid me because I would never ever go out with him. He still didn't really accept this, but he left. I still see him around campus sometimes, and the last time he saw my friends he asked about my study abroad, which I have no clue how he would know about since I never put up anything on my Facebook about it. TLDR guy asks me out. I turn him down. 8 months later he comes back wanting to marry me. Edit spacing. Story 37. I went on a bad date, but the guy wouldn't stop texting me. He was very explicit on how he wanted to have with me, how hot I was, describing how he wants to perform BDSM acts on me. For about 2 weeks, I got so fed up when he wouldn't stop asking me for nudes, I just sent him pictures of naked old men, and sometimes of my turds. Needless to say, he no longer texts me. Story 38. Having to say or do anything beyond just saying no is frankly ridiculous. I shouldn't need to provide an excuse or pretend to be attached or throw at you or call the cops. Story 39. One guy used to email me regularly, call me several times a day, and occasionally call me from outside my apartment. This only stopped when I moved, changed my number, and got a new email address all at once, and then he called my synagogue looking for my details. Still creeps me out to think about that. Story 40. I've been told I look a lot younger than I am 17 and usually get mistaken for 14, and for a few years, like ages 12 to 14, I was seriously a creeper magnet. The older I get, the less it happens. I know I started adapting my body language at around 15 to make it clear to strangers I don't want to be approached, but I also think that trickled over into my love life, because I've rarely been approached by guys ever since then. TLDR got creeped on often as a young teen, gave myself a resting face and closed off body language to stop it. It also stopped normal guys my age from talking to me. Oops. Story 41. Well, after he fellow classmate followed me off the bus from my high school and chased me down the street, I collected a record of all his creepy threatening messages to me and my mom from the past 3 years and showed them to the school authorities. I sat in a room and had a very tense and scary meeting with him, the cops, the vice principal, and my parents all together. Lots of crying and shaking from both ends. Wasn't enough to expel him for the years of threats and harassment that he gave me, but he did leave me alone for a few months before getting expelled for some lame reason, just as we were both supposed to graduate high school. Haven't seen or heard from him since. Story 42. I ran out of a thrift store after being aggressively hit on by a community police officer old enough to be my dad. PSA asking have you ever dated a race guy is not a good way to broach the subject of dating. Story 43. The guy was horrible. I was out with a few friends at a club for one of their social get-together, and suddenly one of my friends' other friends group had turned up and I knew one of them had a crush of some sort on me. He kept touching me, not explicitly but very huggy and grabby. I had bruises from it. I don't recall him being intoxicated, though I kept telling him to stop firmly, and he kept going. I ended up having enough because he wasn't stopping and I was in a position where I didn't feel safe with my friends anymore. I took my leave to the bathroom, call a friend and ask them to become a family member and to call back in 10 minutes with some sort of urgent story so I can legitimately leave the party with no problems against anyone. I changed my friend's name to Mum on my contacts and went back out. He was still overly clingy and I pretty much snapped and told him to off. It got really intense because he grabbed me tightly and pulled me to his chest. I just wanted to go. Then my mum called. He let go and I answered. She told me my grandmother died and they are going to come and pick me up in 5. I didn't tell him anything barkeeping that story and ended up making an exit out the club. To this day, I have no idea why my true friend said that, but it was somewhat effective. I blocked him on all social media for good measure. Not friends with a lot of them anymore either. They weren't exactly supportive of my negative feedback to his advances.